Alrighty, in today's video, we're going to be talking about 13.6, which is solving quadratic equations by factoring. So we're going to take the techniques that we've been doing and just go one more step further. All right, so here's our first example. We're going to solve all of these by our factoring techniques. So we start with y minus 7 times 3y minus 5 equals 0. Now we're going to solve this by something called the zero product rule, which basically states if x times y is equal to 0, then, so if, then x equals 0, y equals 0, or both equal 0. So for something to equal 0, for a product, one of the values have to equal 0. So the way we do that is we take, once we factor it, so now we're going to start off by just solving. But if we factored a trinomial and got this outcome, we would then take each one of those factors and set them equal to 0. And then we solve these just like we did in chapter 9. So the opposite of subtracting 7 is adding 7. So in this case, I get y equals 7 as one of my answers. And then over here, I have to get rid of the constant first. So I'm going to get rid of the subtract 5 by adding 5. And then I can get rid of the coefficient of 3. This means multiplication, so the opposite of that is division. So then I get 5/3 as my second answer. So that's the only extra step that we're doing is we're taking our factors now and setting them equal to 0 and solving them like we did in chapter 9. So let's do quite a bit of examples so you have plenty for your homework. Number 2, again, we're going to solve. We're going to look at something like this. V or 4v squared equal 8v. And what we want to do is when we deal with these type of problems is before we can factor, we have to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to move everything to one side. And since the square is already positive on the left, I'm actually going to move the 8v over. And then it's a positive 8v, I'm actually going to subtract the 8v. So then I get 4v squared minus 8v equals 0. Now, remember, the number one question when it comes to factoring is the greatest common factor? So I start with my smallest number of 4, and I ask myself, does it go into 8? And it does. So 4 would be the greatest. And then I notice they both have a v, and the exponent here is 1. So therefore, the largest I can take is 1v. And then in parentheses, I'll figure out what is left by dividing both of these terms by the greatest common factor. So the 4's would cancel, and v squared divided by v is just v. 8 divided by 4 is 2, and then the v's would cancel. In this situation, all we had to do is take a greatest common factor out. So then our last step now will be to set these factors equal to 0, and then we solve them. So remember, a number next to a letter indicates multiplication, so the opposite of that is division. So then 0 divided by 4 is 0. And then the opposite of subtracting is adding. And then 0 plus 2 is 2. So there will be your answers there. Let's look at another one. In this one, we have x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. So it's already set equal to 0. So I'm going to use my factoring techniques. There's no GCF. So I need to multiply to my c, which is 9, and add to my b, which is negative 6. So I'm multiplying to a positive, adding to a negative, so that tells me both signs better be a negative. Start with your basic, so -1, -9, but that gives me -10. 2 doesn't go into it, but 3 does, 3 times. That gives me +9 and happens to add up to -6. So there's my winners. So then I write it as x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals 0. And then you would set each factor equal to 0. And then I would add 3. That's the opposite of subtracting. And then I would add 3, which is the opposite of subtracting. In this situation, I get the answer twice, so I'd only have to write it one time. Alrighty, let's look at some more situations. Let's look at 9x squared minus 27x equals 36. Remember, our first step is to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to move the constant over to the rest of the terms. And by doing that, it's a positive. So to move it, I have to subtract it. Notice I cannot combine anything, so I'm going to rewrite it as 9x squared minus 27x minus 36 equals 0. Now remember, we have to pull a greatest common factor out if there is one. Sorry about that. In this case, I look at my 9, ask myself, does it go into 27? It does. Does it go into 36? It does. So I'm going to factor out a 9. And then that means I'm going to divide all of them by 9. This term does not have an x, so an x is not in common. So that just gives me x squared. 27 divided by 9 is 3. 36 divided by 9 is 4. Now I'm ready to do the t-chart. So now I need to multiply to my c, which is -4, add to my b, which is -3. Since I'm multiplying to a negative, one of them has to be a negative, and since I'm adding to a negative, my larger number has to be negative. So I'll start with 1 and 4, and my 4 would have to be negative. So 1 times -4 is -4, and 1 minus 4 happens to be -3. So there's my winners. Don't forget the GCF. So then I get x plus 1, x minus 4 equals 0. And so now I'm ready to set all my factors equal to 0, including the greatest common factor. So I get 9 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. Now in this situation, 9 does not equal 0, so I can discard that. That is not a true answer. Then I can come over here and I can say, all right, the opposite of adding 1 is subtracting 1. So x equals -1. The opposite of subtracting 4 is adding 4. So x equals 4. All right, let's see what we got. Let's try this next one. We have x minus 8 squared equals 16. So in this situation, there's no factoring needed. I have to get rid of this square though. So to get rid of this square, I'm going to take the square root. That is the opposite of a square. But if I square root this side, I have to square root this side. So therefore that will cancel each other out. I'll be left with x minus 8 and when we square something, sorry, square root something, it's actually going to be the plus or minus of that result. So in this situation, I would have plus or minus the square root of 16 means what number times itself. will give me 16. And in this case, that would be 4. Now, the reason we say plus or minus is because 4 squared is 16 and negative 4 squared is 16. So we don't know what the number used to be prior to taking the square root. So we take both situations. So now what happens is we have two equations, x minus 8 equals 4 and x minus 8 equals negative 4. So in both situations, I'm going to add 8. So 4 plus 8 gives me 12. And then when I add 8 over here, negative 4 plus 8 gives me positive 4. The mistake a lot of students want to do is they'll say, oh, if this is 12, this has to be negative 12. That is not the situation here. And so don't fall into that trap. Actually add 8 to positive 4 and add 8 to negative 4. All right. So I see some different situations. Let's look at number 6. We have 2x, x minus 4 equals 3 times 4 minus x. So when we used to solve equations in chapter 9 and 10, first thing we did is got rid of these parentheses. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to distribute. So 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 4 is negative 8x. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times negative x is negative 3x. Now I'm ready to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to move everything to the left since my x squared is over there. So I'm going to subtract 12. And then I'm going to add 3x. Now watch what I do with this 3x here is I'm actually going to line it up with the 8x because that right there would be like terms. This would all turn into 0. So I have 2x squared. Negative 8x plus 3x is negative 5x. And then drop your negative 12. That could not combine with anything. Equals 0. I look for a GCF. I do not see one. So then I go into my t-chart. Remember, if I have an actual A, so this is your A, B, C, I have to do A times C. So in this situation, that's A times C. So 2 times negative 12 is negative 24. And then I want to add to my B, which is negative 5. In this situation, again, you just kind of go through your multiples. I want to multiply to a negative, so one of them has to be a negative. And since I'm adding to a negative, that tells me a bigger number has to be negative. So I do 1 and negative 24, and that gives me negative 23, so that did not work. 2 goes in 24 12 times, but that would give me negative 10. 3 goes into 24 8 times, and that would give me negative 5. So there's my winners right there. So then I go, all right, this is x plus 3, x minus 8 equals 0. Also remember that extra rule, when we have an A, we have to divide by the A. 3 halves does not simplify, so the 2 just goes to the front. So this becomes 2x plus 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So now I'm going to set each factor equal to 0. And then I'm going to solve. So the opposite of adding 3 is subtracting 3. And then a number next to a letter indicates multiplication. So the opposite of that is division. So I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. I can't reduce this fraction, so I leave it as negative 3 over 2. Over here, all I have to do is do the opposite of subtracting by 4, which is adding 4. So then I get x equals 4. All right, so that it gets a little bit more intense each time. Let's look at a different situation. So number 7, we have x squared over 6 minus x over 3 equals 1/2. So in this situation, I don't like fractions. So I'm going to actually multiply everything by the least common denominator, which in this case we have 6, 3, and 2. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the smallest number that all three numbers can go into? And so the way I like to do this is what 1 times that value is. Let's look at what 2 times these values are. And whatever the largest number is, I won't multiply that one. So 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. So these two numbers are the same. So now I'm going to try the third. So 3 times 2 is 6. So therefore, I find out that 6 is the least common denominator. So what I do with that information is I'm now going to multiply every fraction by the 6. All right, so I'll multiply here, here, and here. And so when I multiply, it's like over 1, so I just multiply straight across. So 6 times x squared is 6x squared. 1 times 6 is 6, minus 6 times x is 6x. 1 times 3 is 3, equals 6 times 1 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. Now I'm going to simplify. The 6's cancel, so I'm left with x squared. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. So now I got it back to one of our normal situations that we were dealing with. And I need to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to move the constant over. So I'm going to subtract 3, since that's the opposite of a positive 3. I cannot combine it, so I'll just rewrite it. And now I have it equal to 0. So now I'm ready for my t-chart. So now I need to multiply to my c, which is -3. Add to my b, which is -2. I'm multiplying to a negative, adding to a negative, so that tells me one of them has to be a negative, and that would be the bigger number. There's going to be 1 and -3. That multiplies to -3 and happens to add to -2. So then I have x plus 1 times x minus 3 equals 0. And then I want to do my last step, which is setting each factor equal to 0 and solving. The opposite of adding 1 is subtracting 1. So I get x equals -1. Opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3. So I get x equals 3. So quite a bit of a process, but they're going to throw a lot at you. So I want to make sure you have plenty of examples. Let's look at another one. Let's look at number 8. We have x plus 4 squared equals 9. So what we're going to do here is I want to get rid of that square. So I want to take the square root of both sides. When I do that, again, the square and the square root cancel. I'm left with x plus 4. Remember, we're going to do plus or minus. That's going to be plus or minus the square root of 9, which is 3. I then set each one of these as different equations. So x plus 4 equals 3, and x minus 3, oh, my bad. X plus 4 equals -3. So the opposite of adding 4 is subtracting 4. So 3 minus 4 is -1. And then we'll subtract 4 over here. So -3 minus 4 is -7. And there you go. All right, so let's do another one. So we got number 9. This one is 4x cubed minus 12x squared minus 40x equals 0. Remember, number one question is, once it's set equal to 0, is there a greatest common factor? So I look at my 4, which is the smallest number, and ask myself, does it go into 12? And it does. Does it go into 40? And it does. So 4 would be my greatest common factor. And then I notice they all have an x. And my smallest exponent is 1, so I can pull out 1x. So now I got to figure out what is left by dividing each one of these terms by the greatest common factor. The 4's would cancel. x cubed divided by x, that would be 3 minus 1, so that gives me x squared, minus 12 divided by 4, which is 3. X squared divided by x, that'd be 2 minus 1, so that's just 1x, minus 40 divided by 4 is 10, and then the x's would cancel, and that'd give me 0. And then from there, I'm going to figure out what multiplies to my c, which is negative 10, and what adds to my b, which is negative 3. So in this case, I'm multiplying to a negative 10, adding to a negative 3. So that tells me that one of them has to be negative, and since I'm adding to a negative, the larger number has to be negative. That gives me negative 9 though. Let's try 2 and negative 5. There it is right there. So then I have, don't forget the greatest common factors, I got 4x, and then x plus 2, x minus 5, all equals 0. So now I'm going to take all my factors, and I'm going to set them equal to 0. So the opposite of multiplying, because the number next to it, letter means multiplication, is division. And 0 divided by 4 is 0. Opposite of adding 2 is subtracting 2. So in this case, x equals negative 2. Opposite of subtracting 5 is adding 5. So I get x equals 5. So there's all of your answers there. Alrighty. So now they want us to go another step further. And they're going to give you the answer. They're going to say, hey, your answers are x equals 4 and x equals 3/2. Can you give us what the equation or the polynomial would have been before you got these answers? So we're going to work backwards here. So if I have x equals 4, I need to set this equal to 0. So I'm actually going to subtract 4 on both sides. So I get x minus 4 equals 0. Over here, I don't like fractions. So I'm actually going to multiply by 2 because that's my only denominator. So I multiply both. Remember, this is over 1. So 2 times x is 2x. You can put 1 over 1 if you would like. And then 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. But then we're going to simplify this. So 2 divided by 1 is just 2. And 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. I no longer have fractions. So now I can set this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 3. So I get 2x minus 3 because I could not combine those. Now these would be the factors I would have. So going in reverse, I would then have x minus 4 times 2x minus 3 equals 0. And then from that, I would need to re-multiply it out to see what it looked like. So I'm going to do the box method from earlier in the chapter. Oh, actually, no, this was in chapter 12. So this would be x and negative 4, 2x and negative 3. So then I'm going to multiply them. So x times 2x is 2x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 2x times negative 4 is negative 8x. Negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. So then I get 2x squared. Add these up. So negative 8 plus negative 3 gives me negative 11x. And then plus 12 equals 0. That would be your original equation. So that last question on your homework, they just want you to work backwards from everything that you have learned from chapter 12 and 13. All right, so that would pretty much conclude chapter 13. And your test will open up on Monday. Practice test has been open. So definitely go through the practice test before you go through the test. I believe it opens up on today, the 21st. And then it stays open until next Sunday. You have unlimited tries on the practice test. It's not a grade. But when you take the test, it is a 2.5 hour test. So make sure you have 2.5 hours blocked for you to take it. Other than that, that is all that I got for today. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.